Future Talk, Innovative Partnerships for the SDGs, Scaling Impact Through Collaboration. Please give a warm welcome to Urmi A Goswami from the Economic Times.
Welcome to this session on innovative partnerships for SDGs and scaling impact through collaborations. Before I invite everybody on stage very quickly, we are obviously in a time of several transformations, digital being a key one. And this transformation is possible to have on scale at the speed required only through collaboration, through multi-stakeholder partnerships. And to have this discussion during this session, I will now invite on stage Her Excellency Minister Rosalie Matondo, Minister of Forest Economy, Republic of Congo.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Robert Opp, Chief Digital Officer, UNDP.
Madam Minister.
Leslie Ouarzazi, Deputy Head, Central African Forest Initiative. My apologies for having mispronounced your name. And last but not the least, Nishant Lalwani, CEO, International Fund for Public Interest Media. As I started off by saying, we are in a time of important transformations, digital being a critical one. Digital, and more so AI, has the promise to redefine the future, but it brings with it risks of deepening divides. And divides as the SDGs promises to bridge. What we will do in this session is to focus on how to ensure that AI does not become a tool for perpetuating divides, but how inclusivity, collaboration, co-creation can make AI the tool it can be. That means developing countries are not just takers, but co-creators involved in design, development, and deployment of AI to ensure that AI is the tool that delivers on the promise of SDGs. We'll explore systematic barriers to AI adoption and focus on partnerships like the AI Hub for SDGs and, of course, the open source tool developed with CAFI to show that it is possible. I will begin this round, which of course we hope to have time for questions from the audience. With you, Madam Minister, reflecting on the need for digital and AI systems to be inclusive and taking into account local and indigenous knowledge and community priorities, how can we ensure that developing countries, particularly in Africa, are part of the AI-powered future? And where do you see the role of partnerships in this?
Merci infiniment pour cette opportunité que vous nous donnez.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak about this topic, which is very important. So especially about AI and the new technologies. In the context of partnerships, we are from the Congo Basin, and we are the second most important economic and ecological area in the world. We have a deforestation rate which is very low of 0.75%, and for the rest of Africa it's over 1%. So we have communities, indigenous communities that live in these areas, and we have new technologies, but if we want to reach out out to these indigenous communities, we need to start from the local level. So do we have access to computers? Do African children have access to computers and to tablets, etc.? And we don't really see this in rural areas, in indigenous communities, and I don't really see how artificial intelligence can really start there. We need to start from scratch, that is in primary schools, so that African children know what computers are, and then those who are in secondary schools also need to know how to use these new software tools. And only through this we can develop artificial intelligence. Otherwise, Africa will always be left behind with regard to these new technologies. The Congo Basin has been working in partnerships for a long time. Without partnerships, we cannot move forward. In the Congo Basin in Central Africa, we have demonstrated how bilateral, multilateral partnerships can also lead to sustainable forestry. We do forest management together with our partners, with France, with Germany. We also have partnerships with America, and we also have a partnership with the countries of CAFI, which is the Initiative for Central African Forests. They are also trying to finance activities to counter climate change. And this is very important in the context of what we do, and also in the context of our cooperation between the countries of the North and the South. It's also important when it comes to cooperating amongst ourselves. We need to apply and implement technologies directly. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just have to adapt it to other regions of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Minister. What the minister said about how, children are deprived of tablets and how can they be equipped to use AI as a tool. And it's a perfect segue for the question I have for you, which is, it's not just Congo's experience, it's experience of many developing countries that find themselves excluded from the AI conversation because they lack the capacity, whether it's the skills or the implements. And even when in partnership, it would seem like they are net recipients rather than co-creators and partners in the true sense of the word. So could you tell us a bit about how the UNDP is trying to bridge this, change this format where the developing countries are actually partners in true sense, enabling them to make the most of this AI revolution, if one may call it that?
Absolutely, and thank you for the question. And it does, I think, bridge nicely from what Madam Minister was saying in the context of the Congo. What we see in many countries around the world is that there's still a strong digital divide. Still 2.6 billion people don't have regular access to internet. That's not just a connectivity problem, it's an affordability problem and a usability problem as well. So there's that. There's digital infrastructure challenges, also when it comes to government services and government digital infrastructure. And now when we talk about AI, that inequality is exacerbated even more. Because if you look at where the actual compute power is globally, only 2% of the world's data centers are in Africa, just as one example. When we went out and surveyed African innovators for the kinds of things that they need, only 5% of them said that they had sufficient access to compute resources to innovate with AI platforms. We know that there are challenges around data availability when it comes to the data that is available or accurate or representative for putting into systems like artificial intelligence that will really reflect the values, the languages, the local contexts of people. And that's why at UNDP we take a fundamentals or a foundational approach to this. We need to look at these foundational things. So there's a whole set of policies and strategies around where you want to go in terms of a roadmap, and we do artificial intelligence landscape assessments with countries to look at what is present in those ecosystems and what's missing in those ecosystems. But generally speaking, The things that are missing, I already mentioned some of them, but data. So we look at how can we ensure that we have the kinds of representative data, like language data, that is able to be used for deploying in AI systems. Interestingly, one of the languages that we're working in now is Lingala, which is one of the languages in the central, the Congo Basin. This is a language spoken by tens of millions of people. So it's not a small language, but the representation of that language on the internet is just not sufficient. So we're working toward building data sets that can be openly available and incorporated into systems. You mentioned capacity. No country has sufficient digital capacity right now. So we work on capacity building with different partners on skills, but civil servants and policymakers, and giving them capacity to make them comfortable to work in this space. And then also working and looking at partnerships that we can use for trying to get more computing access, compute power access available for innovators as well. And then the last thing I'll say is that this has all come together for us in an initiative that you mentioned under the G7 last year under Italy's presidency, which is around really creating a hub for private-public partnerships, private sector partnerships, also public sector, on how do we really create more business conditions for African innovations ecosystems to really flourish and adopt AI more widely. So it's really about getting the foundations right and making sure that we're bridging the digital divide, but we can't, these countries are not going to wait, and they shouldn't wait, before we can get those fundamentals in place, get the AI in place at the same time.
So basically you have to do a marathon at sprint speed.
Yes.
But
Exactly.
It's nice to know that people are on the job to get the world doing that. Ms. Ouarzazi, sorry, once again. Leslie, may I just call you Leslie?
Yes,
okay.
please do.
Yeah. You know, this new open source, new digital tool that CAFI has developed with the Congo Basin countries, if you could give us an idea about that, sort of a preview of that, but also more importantly, because it's such an important innovation, what kind of lessons do we draw for other parts of the world, and so that they can begin to design similar systems which serve and are governed by local communities, because that's ultimately what we want. If we want to be part of, if everybody has to be a part of this, then we should be all in it together.
Okay, thank you very much for the question, and I'm very happy to intervene after Her Excellency and you, my colleague in UNDP, because actually what I'm going to talk about perfectly illustrates the kinds of partnerships we can establish to promote digital public goods. CAFI is an initiative. It's a coalition of the partner countries in the Congo Basin and coalition of donors, which supports this country for forest preservation. And it's a 10-year initiative where we had a lot of results thanks to the resource mobilized. But we also, or the countries, the governments of the region also faced a challenge. I was saying earlier that the deforestation in the Congo Basin countries is due to small-scale activities, due to poverty, because the local communities, need the wood for slash and burn agriculture, for wood energy, for timber, and there is a need to reverse this trend through policy measures, but also through giving direct incentives to communities on the ground, to preserve the forest. And so there is a willingness from the government of the regions to develop approaches and systems to provide these direct incentives to the community to reward their conservation efforts. So what we call payments for environmental services. Actually, Costa Rica, is a country which implement such an approach for the past 20 years and is one of the sole countries in this world which reversed its deforestation trend dramatically thanks to its policy measures, but also its payment for environmental services system. And the countries, so UNDP, so the office of Michael, they develop a system, management tool that we used together with the Congo Basin country, with all the experience we had through pilot projects for payment for environmental services to develop a centralized system which can gather the information, the data on all the payment for environmental system project cycle. So from the application of farmers, the contracting with the farmers, the verification of results, whether this many number of hectares were preserved or not, and through payments, through mobile banking. So we used, this digital tool, and we worked a lot with, these countries and the local user to develop, to contextualize, the system and to test it also with the local user. And now, thanks to this tool and all the knowledge and experience of this country, we have a system which can, which is transparent, and and so access will be granted to this tool, and you can verify how many farmers are enrolled, how many hectares are preserved, and so we believe that it's groundbreaking. So the willingness of the countries, the governments of the region is to launch this tool at COP13 in Belém, and they would like, because you asked, how they can, we can make it, the other countries from the global south can benefit from it. The coalition within CAFI, so donors and governments, would like to make this tool, which was made by the Central African countries for Central African countries, but to become a digital public good accessible to other countries. And in 2 days, Costa Rica will join the CAFI initiative. They will sign the CAFI declaration because they have a lot of knowledge. They implemented such an approach for the past 20 years, but they do not have, this innovation. So they are very much interested in sharing their knowledge, on PES, and getting, the knowledge from the Congo Basin with this tool to modernize their system in Costa Rica. So this is South-South cooperation.
It's truly like a partnership, what we really need to ensure that AI helps deliver on the promise of the SDGs. Mr. Lalwani, I come to you, and again, I'll draw on something Mr. Orp said, which is about languages that do not have presence on the internet, but need to be able to actually deliver, need to have a presence. And I'm wondering that if the AI technology is only as good as the information that goes in to it, how do we engage independent media as partners to ensure that the AI tool serves all?
Yeah, thank you for the question and for having me here. So first, for those who don't know, IFPIM, we're the International Fund for Public Interest Media. We're the only multilateral fund in the world that finances journalism. We're an international organization based in France, and we have government supporters like France and Switzerland and Sweden, also Ghana, Brazil, as well as philanthropic supporters and corporate supporters as well. And we work with about 100 media organizations right now across the global south and Eastern Europe, and they're all navigating the challenges and opportunities presented by AI in some shape or form. And of course, the relationship between AI and journalism is an incredibly important one. Not just for those media organizations, but also for the tech companies that are trying to ensure that their users have high quality and accurate experiences in the most part. Not all tech companies are doing that, but in the most part, they're trying to ensure that. And with that in mind, we have to think, well, where do these AI models, and in particular, large language models, where do they get data on a daily basis that's fact-checked, that is trustworthy, and that tells you about what's happening in the world? The only place they can get that information is journalists. Meta, OpenAI, others have struck deal with certain journalism companies, but the larger ones, like Reuters and Axel Springer and so on, to get their archives, their daily journalism content. But that really represents a tiny fraction of the kind of news data that exists in the world and that's relevant to users. And that actually leaves a huge gap for disinformation to fill. Yeah. And what we're seeing in these models is that there's a huge propagation of disinformation, and it's quite willful in some cases. And this disinformation is undermining all the goals that we've been talking about over the last couple of days here. You can't really have conflict resolution, you can't have climate change prevention, you can't have any kind of security if you don't have the kind of stable information environment and accurate information that we need. So just a few examples. AI models like Grok are actively perpetrating climate denial perspectives, which are baseless, and also white genocide perspectives from South Africa, which are a favorite of the American far right. As an Indian, I was pretty horrified by the disinformation being produced by chatbots during the recent India-Pakistan conflict over Kashmir. There were videos from Khartoum being purported as missile strikes on Pakistani air bases by India, by one LLM. In a recent study around the Australian election, 1 in 6 chatbot answers directly reproduced Russian propaganda when asked about certain topics. So this is happening now, and also, unlike social media, which is sort of semi-public, this is happening in private. When my parents or my children are putting queries in and getting responses that I won't see unless someone screenshots them and puts them out there, as they did with the white genocide conspiracy. So this is obviously extremely troubling and has massive implications for national security, for conflict resolution, and so on. And there's 2 major factors that I think, it's a complex problem, but there's 2 major factors that I wanted to highlight today. One is that Russia and other autocratic actors are taking this issue way more seriously than we are. And they're investing a lot more in their goals, which are very different to the goals of the international community. They're investing a lot more in those goals than, for example, the OECD. So, for example, the Pravda, which is the Russian Moscow-based disinformation network, is quite well known. Last year, produced 3.6 million articles with the purpose of it being used for LLMs as grounding data. And they feed these articles through essentially fake sites like the Boston Times. You may have heard of the Boston Globe. The Boston Times is not a real newspaper, but is used to essentially trick LLMs into absorbing this data. Russia invests about 1.5 billion in propaganda outside its own borders every year. And this is a very clear attempt to undermine shared truths. Look, what's the antidote to that? It's ensuring that independent reporting is vibrant and alive and well-resourced, and it can be used to train LLMs, but also can show up in multiple other places. And yet the market can't really support independent journalism, despite the fact that it's a public good. In every single country in the world, without exception, we are seeing independent journalism die out. And that's because there isn't the money for it. Up until January, all of the OECD countries together spent about $500 million a year supporting, in foreign aid that is, in ODA, supporting journalism. Since January, with USAID's collapse and also aid cuts around Europe, we're now looking at about 300 million this year. So that's 1/5 of what Russia spends every year. And a few hundred million is a tiny amount. It's not a difficult amount to increase. It's the amounts of money we're talking about here are small, but they do have an impact. The second thing to your question, Urmi, that's really resulting in this level of kind of disinformation and instability in the information ecosystem is that the AI race is really happening in English and to some extent in Chinese. And you were talking about Lingala, but even in Spanish, the third most spoken language in the world, there was a study by NewsGuard in January which showed that 27% of queries in their study returned disinformation, and 21% didn't return any answer at all. So that's half the queries in the third most spoken language in the world are not satisfactory or are actively misleading, which is astonishing given the diversity of languages and the long tail that we need to cover here. And that's because so many of these deals that have been done with journalism organizations are in English, or they're Western and European entities, and that causes huge bias in the results, cultural bias as well as factual errors. And so to remedy this, what we've done as the International Fund is set up the Global Media Trust, which is a vehicle that will allow for individual and collective licensing of non-English language content from Brazil, from Indonesia, from many other countries, with AI companies. And what we'll do is we'll provide pricing and valuation support, we'll provide negotiation support so that relatively small to mid-sized media organizations can actually do deals with AI companies. They can get paid for their content, which hasn't happened very much at all. I mean, there's no deals that have happened in Portuguese. There's none that have happened in Bahasa in Indonesia either. And yet content is being scraped. So we can get media organizations paid, and hopefully we can improve the quality of outputs in these languages. Right now, propaganda is driving political narratives, it's driving social unrest, perhaps at a greater rate than any time in recent history. And so to stop this, we really need to firstly support independent media, and secondly, ensure that media is actually the one that's feeding the AI models that we're all going to be using in the future.
So yet another big job for us to sort of tackle. Madam Minister, I come back to you with a question on when we are talking about scaling AI for SDGs, what does meaningful impact look like to you, and what kind of partnerships are you looking at to make that possible?
Oui, nous le savons tous que nous sommes à
We all know this. 2030, this is not so much time for humanity. We really don't have so much time to reach the SDGs. This is already in 5 years from now. And I think that this technological revolution we are speaking about here will have come into existence in Africa in 5 years from now. But we need to start from somewhere. And I think that this tool that CAFI is now implementing so that we can have direct financing from or for local communities is very important. Just like the telephone is now used these days, the mobile phone, even in rural communities, and mobile banking is also something which is currently developing in our country. We also need to have the hope that these partnerships will also lead to technological cooperation so that we can all together use these technologies in the local communities the closest possible. And this is something that we should do together with CAFI, because we have already seen that international financing very often does not reach the countries of the Congo Basin, and climate financing even less. And development assistance did not really produce the effects that we were waiting for such a long time. Therefore, we need to think of activities that have a direct impact on our communities. But of course, there are some preconditions ambitions that have to do with the training of our children and the language. You can already see that even on this panel, I'm the only person who speaks French, because there is as well a limitation when it comes to the spread of languages. And we also need to overcome these barriers if we want to really reach out to our local communities. Languages is something that also matter most. Lingala is, of course, an important language, but in schools, our children learn French. And this is why we need to further develop these tools so that they can become efficient. And honestly, 2030, this is tomorrow. And we really need to start right now. I don't think we can make it on time. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, what you say is so correct. And it's to come back to, it's a big task. And obviously, without partnerships of equals, we are not going to get there. Somebody is going to get left behind, and that is not what we want. Leslie, I want to put to you the same question, but I want you to focus in terms of partnerships. What is required to scale up AIs so that it delivers on that promise and not become the perpetrator of the risks that AI also bears within it. So we wanted to deliver on the SDGs and not to deepen the divides that already exist, which of course the Minister has spoken so eloquently about.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So yeah, AI is still not embedded in the tool, but there is a willingness to do so, to help us improve the analysis of data that will be collected. Again, in a single tool, there is this willingness to collect and manage a lot of amount of information. So to inform the decision, when you verify the results, and there is a need to approve a payment, there is, we need to integrate AI to improve, the analysis of all these data. But what is important, there is a single tool, a standardized approach, but we need also to find, this delicate balance between standardization, in terms of rules, structures, the tool, the analysis of data, and the contextualization. When we talk about the Congo Basin, it represents like a continent, and hundreds of millions of people who speak different languages, who face different challenges. And so what is needed is really to constantly work with the local users to test, to get their feedback, and to improve. You just can't rely on standardization and AI. Say, okay, there is a AI analysis and we're going to make a payment based on AI information. There is really a need, and this is what we do, to involve the primary users in the design and in the testing and constant improvement of the tool. So this is what we believe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To Mr. Lalwani, you spoke a fair bit about disinformation, what needs to be done, the partnerships with independent media, exporting independent media. I want to pose the same question to you in terms of the kind of partnerships you need, but also partnerships that respect local context. So therefore, partnerships where everybody is an equal and doesn't seem like, especially developing countries, feel like they are the recipients, that they have actually been, they've been given the keys to the kingdom, but yet they are not equal participants. So what kind of partnerships do you think are required to actually deliver on what you sort of presented to us, a requirement and the promise?
Yeah, well, look, it's not been like the most hopeful 2 days here in Hamburg in terms of the messages coming out. We have got aid being cut. We've got increasing threats, autocratic threats, and AI sort of threatens to turbocharge all of that. And so it's really, really crucial that we tackle this problem together in a coordinated, multilateral way with true North-South partnerships. And that's really what we've tried to do at the International Fund. There's nothing that's more contextual than journalism. It's literally reporting on what's happening in your community. And so we've had to be really, really mindful of the way we design IFPIM at all levels. So for example, the council, which is our highest level governing structure, has majority representation from the Global South, including the highest ranking countries from each of the regions on the Free Press Index. So the president of Moldova sits on our council, for example, the president of East Timor, as well as other countries. We work really closely with the governments of Brazil and South Africa and Indonesia to try and design and implement solutions that can actually help with their information ecosystems, rather than imposing any kind of top-down approach. And furthermore, money is important, and we do obviously have a number of European donors and American donors that enable some of this infrastructure, but none of our donors have any decision rights over the media organizations which we fund. And that's by design. And it's to ensure that funding media does not become an instrument of foreign policy. And frankly, our donors tend to like that because they don't want to be responsible for picking media organizations that may or may not report on their governments or other activities they're involved in. So by leading in a truly decentralized and decolonized way, with teams in each of our regions, with majority representation from countries in the Global South in our governance, we think we can really build value that can sort of survive this crisis.
Thank you. Mr. Opp, one of the things that we have been listening to is, of course, the promise of AI, the challenges, but we first heard Minister Matondo speak about the challenges that exist to actually seize the benefits of this tool, if I can call it a tool per se. But for me, the big question is how do you get governments to focus and say, yes, this is something to invest in. The AI revolution is that, not a silver bullet, but definitely a great pathway. Because if you remember, the minister spoke about how many climate finance doesn't turn up, development aid is an issue. It's almost like a series of being let down. The challenges, the problems are very high. How do we raise AI in its purest and in its best possible form to top of the priority list?
Yeah, I think, yes, AI is a tool, but it also represents a fundamental shift in what the future of humanity is going to look like. And I think most countries actually realize that. And they realize the magnitude of the challenge and the importance. What I think that where the challenges come is so not if to do something about it, but how. And so that is, again, where our approach is to really work on the foundations, those fundamental elements that need to be addressed in countries, capacity and those kinds of things. But it's also at a global level, what we're trying to do with our partners in Germany and other partners as well in this 2 days where we've just launched the Hamburg Declaration for Responsible AI. That was launched yesterday. We have over 40 signatories already, and it basically is a declaration on what we stand for when we approach this new frontier of humanity, really aligning us so that we're focused on putting people at the center. We're focused on understanding how the sustainability and the planetary impacts are. What is the impact on peace, prosperity, and partnerships? And so this is really something where countries really are grappling with this actively, but we need to ensure that as a global community, we're also supporting each other in the best ways to do this that will result in including people and leaving no one behind.
Thank you. We have time for at least one audience question, so if there's anybody in the room who has a question. Nobody has a question. You guys have been so good. Oh, there is. Sorry. Sorry, I missed you. My apologies.
Yes, good evening. Philipp Knill from BMZ, German Development Ministry. We heard about that great example of using digital solutions and AI to show how in the Congo Basin results can be reached and how it can be communicated and monitored and so on. Now, we are working with many of the countries in the region, Minister Matondo, and for sure Norway, UK, Germany, but also we would like to work with Gulf states more, or even China and others to be involved in the Congo Basin future. How do you think, maybe a question to Minister Matondo and as well to CAFI, how can we use these successes that are there much more in the way forward to COP30 for a new framework really for a joint Congo Basin pact? How can we use these new instruments really to make it known much better and bring in the important partners to support it?
Oui, merci beaucoup pour cette question.
Thank you for this very important question. First of all, communication is most important. With the different partners around one table, this is where we should discuss the important matters. And then we need very concrete action on the ground. So the support should also really reach out to those that need it, and then results need to be seen locally on the ground, because we have heard so much this morning about mechanisms and programs that don't really bring about results. And what are the reasons for this? We need to analyze the root causes. Why doesn't development assistance bring about the results that we want? We really need to analyze this, and we need to sit around one table, try and communicate on an equal footing amongst each other. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel, as I said. We just need to take the good lessons learned and then share them with everybody else. And then the world would be a much better place.
Do you want to take the...
Just maybe a quick word. I think this tool, can really help mobilize other donors, but maybe also, let's dream, individuals. If we can showcase the results on the ground. There is a couple of weeks ago, and thanks to the government of Congo, the UN General Assembly endorsed, this text on the decade for afforestation and reforestation. And, there is a willingness, even we know in China and in the Arab state country, they know the importance of reforestation. And the thing with the Congo Basin is that sometimes it's a place, which is maybe unknown. We don't, like investors are not sure, that if they invest their money, whether there will be results or not. There also this communication barrier, which is important. French, even though, it's international language, is not that much shared with, these countries that I just quoted. And so if we have a tool that can demonstrate, how many money you put and what are the results, whether you can see, with the mapping, you can see the trees, whether they are there or not, we really believe that can be a powerful tool for communication purposes and also to demonstrate the results on the ground, to mobilize partners.
So the one thing that does come across is that whereas AI is this tool, this transformative tool, which has the potential to deliver on a huge promise, it also carries risks. But what all of you have shown is you've spoken about the challenges, but also shown what it can deliver and what we must do to make it deliver better, faster, and at scale. I want to thank you, Madam Minister, Mr. Opp, Leslie, Mr. Lalwani, for spending this hour with us, or 45 minutes to be very precise, and for giving us a taste of what AI can be to deliver on the promise of leaving no one behind. Thank you, and thank you to everybody in the audience.
Thank you. Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.